welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. Okay, let's discuss Wheel of Time, the first 3 episodes. Now, how do I put this? I'm not inherently against Wheel of Time. I like the idea of the show. It's a cool, I'm a big fantasy guy. I'm a big fan of fantasy. I got late into Lord of the Rings, but, Harry Potter was my jam as a kid. I read through, Star Wars is basically fantasy in space. Anything speculative fiction, I'm in. You got me. And I think that Wheel of Time does a good job of getting people to, who like speculative fiction to dive in and really, sell that you should watch this. Here's the thing, though. And I've seen a lot of articles online talk about it, is this the next Game of Thrones? Is this going to replace Game of Thrones? Not replace Game of Thrones, but is this going to be, Amazon's answer to Game of Thrones? And I don't think so. I don't think that it's going to, only because that's not the make and model of this show. The sense I got from these first 3 episodes is that it's more of a Lord of the Rings type show. And keep in mind, I haven't read the books, and the entirety of my understanding of what goes on in the books comes from the fact that, he's been on the show before, Peter. He talks about, he's told me about them, and he's like, no, it's more like Lord of the Rings. It gets to be like Game of Thrones later, but to start out, it's like Lord of the Rings, where it's, there's this evil coming, and we have to stop the evil from coming, and we're going to create a team to, team up together and stop this evil, and we're going to, do that. And that's kind of what this is. It's very basic high fantasy stuff. And I think that that's kind of where people are not confused or misguided, but what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm looking at this and I'm seeing people talk about it's not going to be the new Game of Thrones. It's I don't think it's going to be. It'd be with the Lord of the Rings show, it's not going to be the answer to Game of Thrones. I just don't feel like it's a meaningful comparison or a useful comparison to make. I don't know. I feel like it's a problem that doesn't necessarily need addressing. Where it's they don't need a Game of Thrones. They just need, when they say they need a Game of Thrones, they're not saying high fantasy. And I don't think that Wheel of Time is going to necessarily permeate into the pop culture the same way Game of Thrones did, because it's higher fantasy than Game of Thrones ever was, and it's less. There's less things in it for people to do. The Witcher could have been Netflix's Game of Thrones. If we're talking about a high fantasy series that becomes a pop culture mainstay, it's that could have been it. Because, I've read some of the books for The Witcher. I've definitely read The Last Wish, and I feel like I've read another one. But, if we look at, the Witcher series, that could have been it. But it didn't. It had, headlines for, a week, and then it kind of fell by the wayside, because it didn't. I think it's more the distribution method on Netflix's part, but and then the time between seasons, and there are a lot of other factors that go into it. But at the same time, they don't exactly sell the show in the right way, and I feel like this is not going to be that. And I feel like if I'm going to sum up my problem out of the gate, and I think this is part of it. Part of the problem with a streaming kind of show is that we haven't quite come up with a way, well, at least I haven't, because it's kind of new, and it's something that's, unique, where when we talk about TV shows, traditional TV shows as they are on network TV, there's kind of a learning curve when the show begins, because there's the pilot, and the pilot can vary greatly from, the original to where it ends up, where it's they can retool characters and do things like that. If you watch, The Office, the first episode of The Office is basically a shot-for-shot redo of the first episode of the UK Office. And the reason for that is they're setting out, they were using that as a template, and they wanted to go from there. And then after that episode, they retool, say, Michael and all of that. And the first episode of any TV show is there to set up the relationships, the conflicts, and what's going to happen over the course of the show and make you want to tune back in and give you some kind of sense of what's happening. Like, there are some shows that do it well and some shows that don't do it well. Like, one of the best pilot episodes ever is Cheers, because it sets up, because Cheers is a pretty straightforward sitcom and all the characters are kind of there, and, you know, we're going to set up what's happening in this show, and, you know, here are all the relations between all the characters who hang out in this bar, and, you know, we're going to go on from there. And then what happens is, over the ensuing episodes, there's clunky dialogue that happens as a result of maybe people didn't see the pilot, maybe people didn't, you know, are tuning in for the first time based on word of mouth of a friend who's like, hey, this new show is really good, check it out. And then people are like, all right, sure, why not? And you end up with a different, you know, you end up with people who haven't watched it. So, like, again, the example I always use is in Frasier, where it's the second episode, and the plot of the second episode is Martin has just moved in, so, you know, Frasier is trying to, you know, get used to the new status quo, and you know, become someone who's going to, you know, deal with his dad and all of that. The issue is he can't find a moment's peace anywhere in his apartment. Like, he doesn't have, like, he can't go to, he can't go to his couch. He goes to work. He can't find time at work to do his reading. He just wants to, he just wants to read. That's all he wants. He wants to read, and he just can't find a place to do it. So he ends up going to the cafe, and he goes there, and he's hanging out at the cafe. He's reading, and then Niles walks in, and Niles comes in, and he's like, and Frasier notices, and he's like, oh, what fresh hell is this? And Niles goes, is that any way to talk to your brother you haven't seen in years? And it's like, it's clunky dialogue, and it's dialogue that wouldn't happen later in the show. It's like, you know, but the point of it is we are, in one sentence, reestablishing this character's relationship. And when you do a show that is, number one, streaming, number two, straight to series, and number three, streaming on Amazon the way Amazon does, where they dump like 3 episodes and then do weekly incremental after that, you don't have to do that kind of dialogue, and you also don't need to sell a pilot. You can kind of launch right into the story, and you don't need to sit here and be like, well, we need to sell the person on continuing to watch it. Well, sell me on continuing to watch it by showing me characters I care about. Sell me by showing me a setting I care about, or a conflict I care about, or give me something in this show to care about. Give me something that I'll latch onto, and don't just show me a sizzle reel of cool moments that, you know, it's cool and it looks good and stuff like that, but I have no emotional impact. There's no emotional impact to that scene because I don't care about any of these characters. There's nothing there to latch onto and be like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is why I'm going to continue watching after that first episode. And to be honest, had it not been for the fact that, you know, the next 2 episodes were there immediately after to watch, I wouldn't have watched after the first episode, because it's like, I don't have any reason to, like, you've given me no reason to tune in. And I think it's a similar issue I had with WandaVision, where the first episode of WandaVision is not awful. It's a cute exercise in recreating a sitcom from the 50s, and it does it well, but it's like, okay, cool. If I wanted to watch a sitcom from the 50s, I would go to MeTV or Antenna or any channel like that shows this kind of content. I don't need to watch it get recreated with, you know, Marvel characters, and the only reason I tuned in past episode 1 and episode 2 as well, because episode 2 went up at the same time, but episode 2 didn't end in a way that made it, you know, made me want to continue watching. When we do that, you don't give me a reason to continue on besides the fact that I care about, you know, the franchise as a whole. I've watched these characters develop, I mean, these two specifically since 2014 or 2015 with Age of Ultron, but you haven't given me a reason to want to continue on, and had it not been for the Marvel Studios logo before it, and the fact that I was so, like, you know, starved for normalcy, like, seeing a new thing with the Marvel Studios logo, like, Marvel Studios at that point had become kind of a mainstay, so seeing something new with that logo in front of it, I'm like, alright, you know, it feels like something is normal. after, COVID for a year, where it's like, there was nothing, and then here's something, normal, and it felt that way there. And it's like, I don't feel like it's a significant, what's what I'm looking for here? Like, it's just, I don't feel like this show did a good enough job in the first episode to really warrant most people going back. And I don't think this show is going to change any minds on people who don't like high fantasy, and I think that's part of the problem. Like, Game of Thrones had enough gore and nudity and enough intriguing plot lines out of the gate to hook people in. And we're using this fantastical setting to tell this story, but at the end of the day, it's a profoundly human story. I don't think that this show is going to bring anyone around to be a, to be a, to be a high fantasy fan if they're not that already. It's interesting. It's a good show. I've gotten, the first episodes are interesting, and I can't wait to see where they go from here. But I don't think that it's going to become, I'm sure Amazon would be thrilled if it became the cultural, touchstone that Game of Thrones did. It's not going to do that, though. I don't think it's going to make people come around. In the same way that, like, Dune wasn't going to become the next Star Wars, which I saw some think pieces like, is Dune the next Star Wars? It's like, no, Dune was never going to do that, because Dune is a ponderous, what's what I'm looking for here? It's a ponderous, philosophical piece about the role of religion and government and what happens when religion goes too far within the government. It was never going to become Star Wars. I mean, granted, Star Wars and government and religion are inherently intertwined in Star Wars as well, but it wasn't going to become that thing in that way, because there wasn't the extravagance to it that was immediately, everyone will love, children will love it too, and we'll be able to go from there. And I don't think that this show has that either. And I feel like it's, I'm not saying we need, and this is going to sound weird, but I'm not saying we need gore and tits and everything. And I don't think this show would have benefited from additional gore and or tits. And I don't think that I think that they're doing a good job in that regard, where it's like, we're not going to try and lure you in with it. And that's always been my gripe when we talk about making things more mature. It's like, it just means you want to see sex and you want to see gore and you want people to curse. And it's like, you can have mature themes without that, and you can handle something properly without that. Like, we don't need an R-rated Superman movie, because Superman can just be at a PG-13 level. Same thing with Batman. We don't need an R-rated Batman to do a mature Batman story. Like, you can do The Long Halloween and have that be an R-rated Batman movie, and have that be a mature Batman movie, and it doesn't have to be R-rated. You can do Arkham Asylum. You can do, they don't have to be R-rated. I mean, there are certain times it would help, but it doesn't have to be. And there are some stories that you probably do need it. Like, I would say, if you're going to do Maximum Carnage, you probably do need that to be R-rated. Otherwise, you end up with the clusterfuck that was Venom, Let There Be Carnage. But I think that what Wheel of Time does well is it kind of balances mature themes and kind of ages up the traditional high fantasy story to be mature without being over the top explicit. And I'm not, being a prude or anything, but again, if you're gonna lure someone in with the promise of titties and gore, it's not going to, it's fake depth. We'll be back next week with the next episode. This week was fucking busy as fuck. I'm still going to see King Richard. Haven't done that yet. We have House of Gucci on Wednesday. Tomorrow we have, what's that other one called? Master Universe Revelation. Thrawn Ascendancy, Lesser Evil. Licorice Pizza this weekend. What the fuck else was there? Hawkeye. Next episode, Wheel of Time. I'm exhausted. Until the next episode, have a great rest of your week.